formless, nameless. The true master dwells within. Only you can free him.
One thing I've been wondering for a little while now is where the updates for Age of Wushu 2 have gone. For me personally, Age of Wushu is a game that made its way into being a big part of my childhood despite the issues that it had on the US side of it. But when I had originally heard that during the development of Dark and Light that there may be a sequel to the Wuxia-based MMO that I fell in love with so long ago, I knew I had to stay in touch with it. However, back when we were getting news during that time period, it seemed that Snail had described the game as a survival-based title. I saw images of tools that you would use in a game like this, and it confused me as to why they would go down that route instead of sticking true to the martial-based action combat that we know and love. But it appears that now in 2019, for all the info that we have on the game, which is incredibly scarce, they state that it will not just be just a survival game, but also a proper continuation of the original. Now, before we dive into rumors about the game's release, there is one very important thing that you'll need to know about Snail. When it comes to sharing details, they usually keep things pretty close to the chest, at least they have with previous titles, especially Dark and Light. For that one specifically, for the year plus that it was being developed after being showcased at ChinaJoy, I believe, those of us in the community would constantly scavenge for any sort of details we could find. Whether it was new screenshots or 10-second GIF animations, just about anything we could get our hands on, even if it was like a 15-second trailer which people ended up going crazy over when it finally came out, anything was possible for us. And then of course over time they started to get more and more easygoing with us, and although Snail has quite the reputation built up for themselves, like other companies they do have staff members that genuinely care about their player base. And the reason I'm talking about this is because it seems we're getting some of the same treatment with Age of Wushu 2 currently, and that's of course assuming that it's still being developed, which I would still like to believe that it is. Their most recent post on social media dates back to June, and recently people have been throwing rumors my way as to the release of this game, and stating that it could be this month or maybe even as early as Q1 of next year. The part that worried me was if the game would be fully complete when it did come out. A lot of developers have a knack for releasing unfinished products, and I'm hoping the trend does not continue down for these types of games, although it is highly likely. But luckily what can be considered is that for Snail, from what I've seen and heard so far, when it comes to the China-based company for them, they do a pretty good job at managing their games. And from what it seems, the Chinese version might end up being the first one to drop. But to go into what we do know, right now there is an ongoing countdown for the game itself that was made by someone else other than the company itself, which makes it completely unofficial. However, what Snail did do was post this on their Facebook page for the game, and it's been on there ever since June. It's because of this that people were believing that the game would come out either this year or early next year. But as we talked about with previous examples, there's hardly a trace of communication regarding Age of Wushu 2. We have seen about a handful of videos pop up in the YouTube space claiming to be Age of Wushu 2 gameplay, but it's a little hard to tell. It doesn't look like the original for sure, and can be seen as an upgrade, but is this truly what the sequel will look like when we have it? That is going to be up to us to speculate. Now feature-wise, they did do a Q&A a while back that talked about how the game would work, and they included some of these details. Details like their Q&A with questions about what kind of ping performance we can expect and what the special effects will look like, to which they replied that the overseas players will have an overseas version, which since this Facebook community looks like it's for the Chinese website, I could only imagine they're talking about us in the US and EU, and other places of course as well. They also say that the costumes will look like traditional martial arts outfits, with there supposedly being a main storyline in the game but no side quests. And also, to skip ahead a bit, when it comes to marriage and children, apparently that is something they plan for the game, alongside the possibility of your own horse being killed in the return of the Rootless clan. Which for those of you who don't know, I believe this may be referring to a clan that isn't bound to any schools of Wushu and can learn different abilities from other schools. It's been a while since I played, and although I know many of us were hunting down other skill books to expand our arsenal, I don't fully remember trying out the quote-unquote Rootless clan before I stopped playing. But I did get to see eunuchs. And yeah, don't ask. Another important topic to discuss is that around the time Dark and Light was coming out, there were some very interesting details circulating around Age of Wushu 2 and its release. To put it into a timeline, around August of 2017, the producer had told us that they hadn't expected the development for the game to be that hard, but since development had started back in 2014, they have since needed to delay the game to attempt to perfect it. During this time, it was said that it would be ready in 2018, alongside a supposed alpha test starting in November of 2017 that was supposed to mark the game's release was getting close. However, before we continue, I'd like to say that I'm very glad they didn't release it in 2017 because apparently they had been talking about the game following a similar model to Dark and Light or maybe even Atlas, stating that on August 3rd, where you might have servers of about 100 players, or basically the grid system where the servers are connected and you can travel between them. And we all know exactly how that went down when it first dropped on the market. When we were actually receiving news on it during this time, I saw an article that showed features that made it seem like Age of Wushu 2 would be a survival game, which I'm sure you would agree that would have been completely horrible to see a game going from Wuxia MMORPG to a 100-player server survival sandbox, and that would be a major step down. In March of 2018, they posted another message saying that Age of Wushu 2 would be scheduled in December 2018, and it would be cross-platformed, while also going into the budget and testing aspects. And of course, since we're about to conclude 2019 and we still have not heard of it at all, that doesn't mean that Snail might not be winding up for it. If we think about what has happened during all this time, Snail has probably had their hands very full with allegedly acquiring Wildcard, the company behind Ark Survival Evolved, the release of Atlas and other survival games since then, and those games have probably slowed them down a lot on Age of Wushu 2. At this point, it could be possible that they no longer even care about their once favored flagship game, but one thing's for sure, the MMORPG market is still incredibly hungry for these Eastern types of MMORPGs from both China and Korea especially. We need ourselves some of that Lost Ark, some Project BBQ, Project TL might even be good to try, Blue Protocol if it turns out to be an MMO, and more. And on China's side, we've got Sword of Legends, Justice Online, Moonlight Blade, which we've been waiting on forever, and so many more. It seems like the majority of games coming out in this MMORPG genre have been coming from the East the past few years anyway, so why not keep the cycle going? Give us some Age of Wushu 2, Snail. We've got the timer set for the end of this month, and you say take it with a grain of salt. Well, no matter how long it takes, as long as it's done right, whether NetEase, Tencent, or Snail Games wants a piece of this Western market, give us back that Wushu experience that some of us have grown to love. We'll be waiting for ya.